Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every failure you've endured, every dream you abandoned, every opportunity that slipped through your fingers, wasn't stolen from you by fate or by some cruel conspiracy of circumstance, but by you. Not by accident, not because you were blindsided, but because on some level, you orchestrated your own downfall. How does one begin to process such a realization? That the enemy, the saboteur, the shadow figure ruining your life, has always lived inside your own chest. You think back, the job interview you skipped at the last minute because you didn't feel ready. The relationship you pushed away with barbed words that tasted of protection but reeked of fear. The goals you announced proudly to friends, then quietly abandoned, shaving them down with excuses until they became ghosts of intentions. Tell me, how many moments in your story carry the faint but unmistakable smell of self-betrayal? And here comes the paradox. You want happiness and success more than anything. You've read about it, prayed for it, and visualized it. Yet at the very threshold, when the door begins to open, you hesitate, you trip yourself, almost as if the vision of a fulfilled self is more terrifying than failure itself. Why? Why would you fight against your own ascent, sabotage your own liberation? If freedom is what we long for, why does it so often feel unbearable once it's within grasp? It's an unsettling question, isn't it? That perhaps what you're chasing is the very thing you are programmed to resist. Every species wants survival, yet here you are, torn by the contradiction of desiring growth, but clinging desperately to the old wounds that limit you. Could it be that you sabotage, not because you are weak, but because some deeper instinct, some psychological undercurrent, demands it? As if some silent law of being whispers, do not rise too high. Do not outgrow the narrative you've been given. What is self-sabotage if not an invisible covenant? A deal you didn't know you signed. One where safety is purchased at the cost of greatness, where predictability replaces possibility, and where the chains are forged not by your enemies, but by your unquestioned reflexes. Consider this. Are you afraid of failure, or are you terrified of success? Success would demand that you become someone new, wouldn't it? That you step into heightened responsibility, that you risk envy, exposure, rejection. It would demand that you shed the familiar comfort of old excuses. And isn't there something oddly intoxicating about those excuses? They keep you small, but they also keep you safe. They build a prison, yes, but they build a prison you know how to navigate. A prison where the shadows are familiar friends. But if you have built such a prison, who then holds the keys? Do you? Or is it possible you've grown so accustomed to your cell that you don't even notice the bars anymore? And here's the more disturbing twist. What if the self that sabotages you is not an aberration, not a cruel mistake, but an authentic part of you? A part that believes it is protecting you. The voice that urges you to procrastinate, the trembling that makes you push away intimacy, the panic that whispers you're not ready yet. What if those are not signs of weakness, but the defense strategies of some ancient, frightened self living deep in your psyche? What then? Would you fight it as an enemy, or learn to face it as an inner guardian who has lost its way? People like to believe that life's greatest wars are fought in courts of justice, on battlefields, in the marketplace. But isn't it far more true that the greatest war is fought within? The daily collision between the self you desperately long to become and the self that refuses to die. The weaker yet strangely loyal self who insists on staying behind. Ask yourself, have you been living your life as a battlefield where your own troops are at war with each other? Is it possible that what you call laziness, fear, procrastination, or distraction is not a series of random flaws, but the very language of your inner saboteur? If so, then sabotage is not an accident but a design, not a fluke, but a secret law running in the veins of your mind. And so we arrive at the great urgent question, why? Why would we betray ourselves? Why would the human heart, so hungry for meaning, so desperate for fulfillment, also develop an uncanny genius for self-destruction? Is it shame disguised as humility? Fear disguised as loyalty to our past? Or is it something older, something archetypal, a universal script written in all minds, urging us to cling to smallness the way a drowning man clings to driftwood? How long will you keep playing the same loop, calling it fate, when it's really you, always you, standing at the threshold with trembling hands? You now stand before the first doorway, the recognition that you are both protagonist and antagonist, creator and destroyer. Every battle you face outwardly mirrors this interior secret war. And until you confront the roots of self-sabotage, until you look into the eyes of the part of you that keeps pulling you backward, no amount of ambition will ever set you free. So, before we peel back the layers, before we unearth the hidden machinery of why human beings sabotage their own destiny with such precision, I leave you with this chilling proposition. Perhaps the life you think you've been denied was never stolen. Perhaps, all along, you've been holding it hostage yourself. And once you realize this, the unsettling truth follows. If you are your own jailer, then only you can choose the moment of escape. The hidden problem and its psychological, philosophical roots. The danger with self-sabotage is that it masquerades as an ordinary weakness. You call it procrastination, self-doubt, distraction, or forgetfulness. These are tame labels, comfortable to wear. But when we strip down those disguises, when we exhume the skeleton buried just beneath the skin, something darker emerges. Self-sabotage is not a flaw in your system. It is the system. At its root lies a truth few want to face. Your psyche is not a united kingdom, but a fractured republic, filled with factions at war. Carl Jung named one faction the shadow, the parts of yourself you deny, repress, bury deep beneath the floorboards of consciousness. Every time you say, "That's not me," the shadow stirs. Every weakness you cannot admit, every fear you dismiss, every hunger you strangle down, it doesn't die, it grows teeth in the dark. One day, when you least expect it, the shadow seizes the wheel of your behavior, steering you toward disaster, and you call it bad luck. But it isn't luck, it's architecture. A person who refuses to be whole is cursed to be hijacked by their unacknowledged halves. Are you beginning to see the hidden logic of self-sabotage? It is your shadow's rebellion. A rebellion against the carefully manicured self you parade before the world. The self who smiles politely, follows rules, insists it has everything under control. The shadow sabotages not because it hates you, but because it refuses to remain invisible. And yet, the shadow alone cannot explain the full breadth of your sabotage. To descend deeper, we must turn to Friedrich Nietzsche, who spoke often of the will to power, the drive not merely to survive, but to overcome, to create, to expand. Yet alongside this fierce will grows its twin, the will to comfort, the will to safety, the will to stay untouched. These two forces clash inside every soul. To grow too much feels threatening. To stay still feels suffocating. So you exist in a torturous in-between, desiring transformation yet fearing it with equal intensity. Self-sabotage, then, begins as a truce. It comforts your restlessness by giving you the illusion of striving, without actually requiring you to risk annihilation. You dream of writing a book, starting a business, loving without walls. And you even take the first steps. But just as the horizon opens, sabotage throws you a rope of excuses. Not yet, not me, not now. It is tragic, but also strangely merciful. You are spared the terror of true exposure. As Schopenhauer would murmur in his dim, pessimistic way, life is a pendulum swinging between suffering and boredom. Self-sabotage ensures you land squarely in the boredom camp, where the sting of danger cannot reach you. But suppressing that danger comes at a terrible cost. Ask yourself, why do so many of humanity's greatest minds collapse into tragic spirals of destruction? Artists, thinkers, revolutionaries. Often they are undone not by rivals but themselves. Consider Jean-Paul Sartre, gripping with the weight of absolute freedom, proclaiming man is condemned to be free. That kind of existential burden, the knowledge that every choice is yours, that no divine overseer will rescue you from the abyss, can feel unbearable. And what is self-sabotage if not an attempt to escape the terror of freedom? Far easier to stumble, to fall, to accidentally ruin what you built. Then you never have to face the question, what if I succeeded? What if freedom really was mine? Viktor Frankl, surviving the horror of the concentration camps, observed that meaning is the one thing no prison can take away. Yet for those who sabotage themselves, it is precisely meaning that terrifies them. To rise, to succeed, to break their own pattern is to accept the burden of meaning, that their life was always and will always be their responsibility. Sabotage whispers a seductive alternative. Perhaps it's not your fault. Perhaps you just weren't ready. Perhaps destiny had other plans. Excuses taste like anesthesia. And like anesthesia, they numb you while they poison your chances at consciousness. But let us not reduce this hidden problem merely to philosophy. Psychology also reveals its fingerprints. Cognitive dissonance clings to us like a second skin. When you hold two conflicting beliefs, I want greatness and I am unworthy of greatness, your nervous system short circuits. The resolution? Sabotage. Destroy the possibility of success before it exposes the dissonance. Call it fear, call it laziness, call it divine timing. What it really is, though, is psychological relief. It is easier to fail than to endure the searing tension of living as both worthy and unworthy simultaneously. Neurology adds yet another layer. The human brain clings obsessively to its patterns. Habit is survival. When you attempt to leap into the new, your amygdala, the fear center, fires wildly as though you were walking into a predator's den. Ancient networks whisper, don't change, don't risk, don't dare. This is not metaphorical. It is woven into your neurons. Sabotage is not simply about weak will. It is biology fighting for the known, even if the known is suffocating you. But here is the cruel joke. Your biology, your psyche, even your culture conspire toward one unspoken rule. Stay small, stay safe. Culture rewards conformity. Families, often unconsciously, build invisible fences around identity. The rebel, the achiever, the quiet one. To break out is to trigger a ripple of disturbance across the collective. You may succeed, but you may also destabilize your tribe. And so, in protecting the equilibrium of the group, you betray yourself. You remain the appointed character in a story that was never written by you. Which brings us to the philosophical marrow of the hidden problem: identity. When you sabotage yourself, what you are really sabotaging is the collapse of your current identity. The self you inhabit clings to its continuity, fearful that any triumph, any reinvention, will annihilate it. And perhaps it's right. To succeed is in some sense to die, to allow an old self to pass away so a newer one can take its place. That's why self-sabotage is not cowardice, but fear dressed as loyalty. Loyalty to who you once were. So let us pause with the weight of this realization. Self-sabotage is not simply an error in judgment, not simply bad habits or poor discipline. It is an existential phenomenon, rooted in biology, psychology, philosophy, even culture. It is the ancient survival script colliding with the modern yearning for transcendence. It is the shadow revolting, the nervous system protecting, the ego clutching desperately to its continuity. No wonder you feel trapped. You are fighting against not just your habits, but against the very architecture of your being. And until you understand that architecture, you will blame yourself endlessly, thinking you are broken. But you are not broken. You are only conflicted. You are a battleground hosting a war between the craving for safety and the hunger for freedom. The deeper question emerges. If sabotage is built into the foundations of who you are, how does one ever climb free of it? Or worse, what happens if you never do? The unseen consequences. By now you've understood that self-sabotage is no minor glitch in the machinery of your life. It is a full-scale operating system running quietly in the background. But perhaps you're still comforted by the thought that its impact is limited. A missed job application here, a delayed project there, an awkward ending to a relationship. Small bruises, recoverable mistakes. Yet the greatest peril of self-sabotage lies not in these obvious wounds, but in its invisible aftermath, the consequences you never measure, the lives unlived, the alternate destinies buried beneath the soil. Think of it. How many inventions have gone unborn? How many books unwritten? How many profound loves untasted? Because sabotage whispered its lullaby of hesitation. How many times did the world lose something irreplaceable? Not because someone lacked ability, but because they walked themselves off the stage before the performance even began. You may remember the failures you can see, but what about the possibilities you never allowed to be born? Isn't that the crueler wound, the ghost of futures abandoned? Psychology speaks to this in the concept of loss aversion, the idea that humans fear loss more than they appreciate gain. On a primal level, the pain of losing $100 feels greater than the joy of gaining $100. But self-sabotage attaches loss aversion not to money, but to identity. Gaining a new self feels like losing an old one. And because that loss triggers such deep panic, you spike your own tires before ever leaving the driveway. You choose not to try, not to risk, all to avoid the unbearable grief of identity's death. But what you consider protection transforms into stagnation. Instead of losing only an old self, you lose 1,000 new selves that could have been born. Neurology sharpens the knife further. The brain, so obsessed with efficiency, builds pathways of thought like well-worn roads. Every time you procrastinate, every time you choose the smaller action over the bolder one, you etch the grooves of that pattern deeper. It becomes easier to sabotage yourself not just once, but habitually. After a while, sabotage is no longer an isolated act. It becomes your autopilot. Imagine spending 10, 20, 30 years letting those grooves harden into highways. What chance do you then have of quick rebellion when the sabotage itself feels like you? This is where the most chilling consequence emerges. You don't even notice it anymore. Sabotage camouflages itself as normalcy. Procrastination becomes taking your time. Avoidance becomes prudence. Settling becomes gratitude. You applaud yourself for stability while unknowingly cheering your own diminishment. It's like applauding the bars of your prison for being so sturdy, ignoring that they were never meant to protect, only to contain. But let's widen the lens. What happens when this private sabotage multiplies across millions of people? Entire societies are tilted not by tyrants alone, but by the quiet withdrawal of their dreamers. Sabotage at scale means an entire culture engineered around fear. Innovation slows, conformity spikes. People anesthetize themselves with comfort products, with endless entertainment, with distractions that keep them too enthralled to notice the rust on their own cages. And doesn't that sound familiar? Look around. How much of modern culture is built, not on bold creation, but on safe repetition? Music reusing the same 4 chords, films reheating the same scripts. A scrolling ecosystem designed not to awaken, but to pacify. Can you feel the fingerprints of collective sabotage here? A species terrified of outgrowing its safe narratives. More disturbing still, the unseen consequence of sabotage isn't only the stagnation of what is good, but the feeding of what is destructive. Because when you repress your vitality, your hunger for expansion, that energy does not vanish, it mutates. People who cannot aim at greatness often aim at substitutes, addictions, compulsions, gossip, resentment. The energy that might have fueled creation fuels corrosion instead. Notice how often your self-sabotage doesn't just prevent growth, but actively breeds suffering. You sabotage a relationship to avoid intimacy and unleash years of loneliness. You sabotage a career leap and bury yourself in trivial tasks, then simmer with envy at those who dared to risk. Resentment accumulates not as a crack, but as a flood. Arthur Schopenhauer believed existence itself was suffused with suffering, and humans endlessly invent diversions to soften its blow. But imagine how much of that suffering is self-inflicted, how much is born not from fate, but from deliberate, unconscious sabotage masquerading as safety. We spend decades numbing ourselves, avoiding any door that smells of risk, only to wake decades later with the anguished realization, I avoided failure, but I failed my life. And that realization does not stay private. Trapped people breed trapped families. A parent who sabotages their dreams may, without words, teach their child to sabotage theirs. An entire lineage can inherit the habits of avoidance, recycling fear as if it were precious heirloom silver. The greatest unseen consequence of sabotage may not be your stalled life, but the ripple you send outward into your bloodline. Legacies perish this way, not through war, but through quiet suffocation of courage. Nietzsche warned of the last man, a creature not broken by tragedy, but made small by comfort, trading the wild glories of existence for shallow entertainments. Doesn't the last man look suspiciously like us, scrolling and scrolling, trading risk for dopamine? Sabotage has given birth to an entire archetype, the self-shrinking human, content to remain low-lying so long as nothing threatens their fragile continuity. And still, the subtlest consequence waits in shadows, your relationship with yourself. Each time you sabotage, you fracture self-trust. You make a promise, then break it. You build momentum, then torch it. Eventually, your own subconscious stops believing you. The voice inside grows cynical. Every new goal feels like a lie, because history predicts you'll strangle it in the crib. This is more dangerous than any external obstacle, because once you lose faith in yourself, who can you ever fully rely on again? So look around and look within. Notice the trails sabotage leaves, not just in wrecked opportunities, but intentions you thought were normal. The anxiety humming in your chest isn't arbitrary. It's the despair of unrealized selves pressing against your ribs. The bitterness bubbling up in quiet moments isn't random. It's your sabotage catching up with you, whispering in retrospect, you could have chosen differently. The unseen consequences, then, are not unseen at all. They are everywhere, woven into stagnation, into culture, into families, into the private weather of your soul. But we train ourselves not to notice them, because to notice would be to admit the grandest betrayal is not the world betraying us. It is us betraying ourselves. And now, with that recognition scraping at the door, the next question is unavoidable. Must we spend our lives bowing to this silent tyrant? Or is rebellion possible? Can a person stop sabotaging themselves when sabotage feels ingrained at the very level of identity, biology, and culture? If you feel cornered now, good, for it is only when the weight of the unseen consequences presses too heavily on the chest that the possibility of rebellion arises. The cage has been mapped, the walls are clear. No more illusions of safety. What remains is the trembling question. How do you break free? The rebellion. How to break free. Rebellion rarely begins with a glorious charge. It begins with a whisper, a quiet no, spoken in the silence of your own mind. No to the excuses, no to the deferrals, no to the invisible hand that has been steering your life into smaller and smaller cages. If sabotage is the tyrant that rules you, rebellion begins the very moment you decide the throne is empty, that the tyrant exists only because you bow. Make no mistake, this rebellion will not look like fireworks. It will often feel like loss, like confusion, like tearing out parts of yourself. Because the first and greatest act of liberation is recognizing that your saboteur is not a foreign enemy. It is you. You cannot oust it with violence without destroying yourself. You can only dethrone it by seeing it clearly, by withdrawing loyalty from its lies. Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. To rebel is to drag the saboteur into the light, to stare it down without blinking. This means catching yourself in the moment of sabotage, not with shame, but with precision. When you procrastinate, you whisper, "Ah, here is fear in disguise." When you lash out to avoid intimacy, you say, "Here is my shadow, trying to keep me safe." Awareness strips sabotage of its secrecy, and secrecy is its only true weapon. But exposure is not enough. To break free, you must forge a new pact with yourself. Here is where the rebellion becomes radical. Stop aiming to eliminate fear, procrastination, or doubt. They are loyal watchdogs, doing their misguided best to protect you. The key is to outgrow the need for them. Their loyalty is misplaced, not evil. Learn to thank the fear, then walk past it. Thank the hesitation, then act anyway. Just as a child eventually outgrows training wheels, you cannot remain in bondage to your primitive protectors forever. Philosophy, too, arms you here. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch was not about dominance over others, but mastery of one's own chaos, the audacity to create yourself anew. When you rebel against your saboteur, you engage in that same art. You refuse to remain the passive victim of biology, culture, and conditioning. Instead, you create. You paint a self that has never existed before. Not because the path is clear, but because you choose to carve it through darkness with bleeding hands. In practice, rebellion often looks absurdly simple, even anticlimactic. It is sitting down to write when every nerve in your body screams, later. It is telling someone you love them, even when your voice cracks with terror. It is sending the application, taking the leap, showing up consistently in the small ways. Many people imagine rebellion feels exhilarating. Instead, it often feels like bricklaying, one act of defiance stacked on another, until a new cathedral rises where once stood rubble. Yet the inner battleground is not fought only with action, but with perspective. Viktor Frankl taught that, even in Auschwitz, he could not be stripped of the freedom to choose his attitude. If that freedom exists under such monstrous conditions, it exists in your daily life. Your rebellion then begins in choosing to interpret sabotage not as proof of weakness, but as evidence of unfinished business within the self. Each sabotage reveals where you still fear change. Each collapse is an X-ray of your deepest loyalties. It also means slowing down enough to detect the patterns of sabotage before they tighten like a noose. Self-awareness is rarely glamorous. It is monitoring your own thoughts like a watchful sentinel. Why am I stalling? What identity am I protecting? Rebellion is forensic, painstaking, methodical, relentless. But once exposed, sabotage becomes fragile. Like a shadow in sunlight, it shrinks under examination. And yet, awareness and discipline alone cannot fully free you. Why? Because sabotage thrives on isolation. In your closed echo chamber, the saboteur's voice echoes louder. Rebellion then requires community, not the kind that soothes your smallness, but the kind that demands your bigness. Seek those who remind you of what you could be, who hiss when you make excuses, who mirror your courage instead of your fear. Humans are porous creatures. You inhale the courage of the strong just as easily as you absorb the fear of the timid. One must also confront the sacred question, what is worth suffering for? Because growth always feels like a kind of death, the death of an old self, comfort, equilibrium. If you flee from suffering, sabotage will forever own you. The rebellion arrives the day you decide that the suffering of stagnation is greater than the suffering of change. Ask yourself, which pain will you choose? The pain of shackles or the pain of wings sprouting through torn skin? Paradoxically, this rebellion requires an odd tenderness. If you fight yourself with cruelty, if you attempt to annihilate the sabotaging part of you, you'll only strengthen it. Treat sabotage not as a demon to kill, but as a frightened child to guide. Every part of you that sabotages has one thing in common. It fears. Sometimes it fears humiliation, other times rejection or irrelevance. Fear is the generator of sabotage, and fear, like all wounded things, can be soothed not only by defiance, but also by compassion. Imagine sitting with your saboteur, eye to eye, saying, I know you're terrified. I know you're trying to protect me, but protection through paralysis will not save me anymore. This is rebellion without war, and it is often the strongest kind. And yet, even compassion cannot excuse cowardice. Compassion without action dissolves into pity. Rebellion will always bring you back to the hard ground of choice. You must act even while afraid. Choose the phone call, choose the discipline, choose the risk. Each choice chisels away at sabotage's throne until it collapses into dust. Some will call this courage, but courage is just sabotage losing its grip, moment by moment, to persistent defiance. Finally, the deepest rebellion is not against fear, but against destiny itself. To sabotage oneself is to say, I belong only to the story already written for me. To rebel is to spit in the face of inevitability, to write a story that terrifies even you. Do you see how dangerous, how sacred that act is? To rise higher than your past self permits. What is that, if not resurrection? So here we stand. On one side, the well-worn cage of sabotage, safe but suffocating. On the other, a wilderness of risk, terror, and transformation. The rebellion is the crossing, and it begins not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but in the next choice you make, however small. For sabotage thrives only on delay, and rebellion thrives only on immediacy. The most radical act you can perform, therefore, is not grand. It is simply this: to refuse to wait any longer. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. Imagine, just for a moment, that you could watch the entirety of your life play back in a single, unbroken film reel. Every hesitation, every collapsed attempt, every moment you sabotaged yourself. Not as isolated events, but as a pattern woven across decades. At first you might ache with regret, but then slowly another impression would dawn. All along, there has been a hidden intelligence at work. Sabotage has not only destroyed, it has revealed. It has been your map of fear, your compass of unhealed territory. This is the ultimate paradox, the deepest and most unnerving truth. Self-sabotage is not your enemy. It is the doorway to your transformation. Think about it. Sabotage only strikes where something sacred is at stake. You do not sabotage brushing your teeth. You do not sabotage trivialities. You sabotage precisely those things that threaten to rupture your identity and birth you into a larger self. Success, intimacy, art, risk, these unsettle the ground under your feet. Sabotage rises there not to ruin you, but to announce, here lies treasure, here lies fire, here lies the threshold of rebirth. What if you began seeing your sabotage not as a curse, but as a secret map? Each time you feel yourself stalling, recoiling, distracting, you could whisper, ah, here is evidence of a doorway. Here is proof of where I am most alive, most vulnerable, most capable of transcendence. In this way, sabotage ceases to be the dictator of your fate and becomes the revealer of your next frontier. Doesn't that turn the entire story inside out? The very behaviors you've despised yourself for become signals of where your true work lies. Just as pain signals injury, sabotage signals potential. The tension, the hesitation, the resistance, they are the smoke that signals the presence of fire. And what is self-actualization if not learning to run toward the flame rather than away? For centuries, mystics and philosophers have wrapped this insight in different clothing. The alchemists of old believed that lead could be transmuted into gold. But the true lead was the unconscious self, heavy, resistant, unrefined. And the alchemy required was not chemical but spiritual. The courage to descend into what seemed base and vile in oneself, to discover the luminous core hidden there. Carl Jung reframed the alchemical metaphor. The gold is wholeness. The lead is your shadow. And to integrate the shadow is not to destroy it, but to accept its gifts, to make of it a partner in evolution. Do you see it yet? Sabotage is the modern word for the alchemist's lead. You thought it was a curse, but it is an invitation. Not an obstacle, but a threshold. Here is the final and most powerful realization. The very part of you that sabotages is the same part of you that carries the seeds of your expansion. What holds you back is not separate from what will set you free. It is the same force, misdirected, awaiting integration. When you procrastinate on writing, it is because the words matter to you. When you withdraw from intimacy, it is because love terrifies you with its immensity. When you avoid responsibility, it is because responsibility is sacred, heavy, world-shaping. Your sabotage carries in its very DNA the evidence of your greatness. The shadow's rebellion is not meant to condemn you. It is meant to ensure you cannot ignore your evolution forever. And so the question shifts, no longer, how do I stop sabotaging myself? That question presumes sabotage is a demon to be exorcised. The true question is, how do I engage with sabotage as guidance, as teacher, as sacred threshold? Engage it with awareness. Engage it with defiance. Engage it with tenderness. But above all, engage. For the opposite of sabotage is not control, it is consciousness. Think about consciousness itself. Neuroscience whispers that the brain is a prediction machine, obsessed with minimizing uncertainty. But consciousness, your ability to witness, to reflect, to choose, that is the one crack in determinism, the one crowbar you can wedge into the machine. Sabotage says, repeat the pattern. Consciousness replies, not this time. That single act of awareness, multiplied over weeks and years, becomes the force by which you outgrow your conditioning, by which you alchemize the very thing that seemed to ruin you. And here, at the terminus of our exploration, comes the revelation that ties it all together. You are not the victim of sabotage. You are its author. And as the author, you hold the power to revise, to reframe, to redeem. Just as a writer revisits an old manuscript, scribbles in the margins, crosses out lines, and writes anew, so too can you rewrite the role of sabotage in your life. From tormentor to teacher, from curse to compass. What emerges then is something astonishing. Freedom no longer means the absence of sabotage, but the ability to dance with it. Like a seasoned warrior who no longer fears the weight of his sword, but has learned to wield it gracefully, you can learn to wield even your own sabotage. Not crush it, not deny it, but harness it as fuel. Resistance becomes energy. Fear becomes direction. Hesitation becomes the proof of meaning. This is why the poet Rainer Maria Rilke urged us, let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Self-sabotage is both beauty and terror. It is the terror of losing your old identity, but the beauty of glimpsing a larger one on the horizon. It is precisely in welcoming both that you transcend. So here is the cinematic ending your life has been quietly waiting for. No deus ex machina, no sudden erasure of struggle. Simply this, that the very dragon guarding the treasure is itself the treasure in disguise. Slay it, and you discover it was your own reflection. Hashtag @meta, pause, sex 0.05. Befriend it and you realize it was your guide all along. And so, the truth about why you sabotage yourself is not simply fear, not simply identity, not simply comfort. It is because sabotage is the threshold keeper of transformation. It ensures that you will never stumble into greatness casually. You must want it deeply enough to wrestle your own resistance into submission or embrace it into partnership. You must earn your becoming. Now the film reel rewinds and you see it differently. Every ruined opportunity, every collapse under pressure, every time you froze at the threshold, it was not an ending, but an initiation. Each moment sabotage appeared, the universe was whispering, here you could rise, here you could be more. Do you feel it now? The paradox resolves into a new vision. Sabotage has never been the end of your story. It has been the beginning of it. And when you finally choose to lean forward into those doorways, hesitation trembling in your throat, heart pounding against the cage of your ribs, you will find what was waiting all along. Your freedom was never locked beyond sabotage, but contained inside it. Liberation was always on the other side of the part of you that was trying, in clumsy loyalty, to keep you safe. So, step forward now. Not into a life without sabotage. That fantasy is unnecessary. Step instead into a life where sabotage reveals your path, where its voice no longer shackles but points. A life where the fracture inside you is not war, but integration. A life where protection and expansion finally shake hands. And in that handshake, the ultimate truth crystallizes. You were never your saboteur. You were always the one destined to transform it.